Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. How are you? Thank you very much for being here in Fundación Telefónica. We're going to be talking about sustainability and culture. It is an association of concepts that is probably not very intuitive or immediate, but it has many, many possibilities. And for this, Nordic Days has organized this conference. As you can see, we have many speakers, a lot of audience, and very interesting projects that are going to be mentioned. I'm going to explain what this festival is about. Probably many of you have heard about Días Nórdicos, but I think it is good to do a brief reference to this festival. It's going to celebrate its 10th anniversary very soon, and it has growing interest. It is the first multidisciplinary festival of music, sustainable design, innovation and culture from the Nordic countries in Spain and in Latin America. And it's also a cultural exchange platform between Nordic countries and Ibero-American countries. Its first edition took place in Spain in 2010, and it is now has the collaboration of Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway and Sweden. Since 2014, it has also been organized in Latin America with different editions organized in Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Mexico, Peru and Uruguay. In 2017, Nordic Days presented its first edition in Aarhus, Denmark. Aarhus, is this how it should be pronounced? That is going to be very soon European capital of culture, with the participation of Ibero-American artists in the framework of the Spot Festival. It is a cultural exchange platform between Nordic countries and Ibero-American countries, including Spain and all Latin American countries. And as you can see, a multidisciplinary festival that in 2019 will be celebrating its 10th anniversary. It offers music, innovation, and also tries to boost the promotion of different artists from Nordic countries. Thanks to the festival, and thanks to Fundación Telefónica for this venue, so that we can celebrate this conference. This is the 5th year that we organize this here, and thank you also to all the speakers who are present here. Thank you to the Chambers of Commerce of Denmark, Finland, Norway and Sweden for the coordination of this encounter. I would like to do a brief introduction of why we're going to be talking about culture and sustainability. With these first considerations, I'm sure that we can have a good starting point, and this will lead to the conviction that culture and sustainability are two concepts that are closely linked. If they don't exist together, they don't exist. The concept of human sustainable development that was created in 1987 in the Brundtland Report said that sustainable human development means understanding the needs of the present without putting at risk the needs of future generations to satisfy their own needs. So in human development, this definition, I think this definition is beautiful, it is simple, and when I read it, I already thought that it is about guaranteeing the future and current needs of our generations, future generations, and all the species of the world. So the concept of development in the 80s and 90s, it is built based on a pyramid, a triangle, that said that human development can only be an environmental development, social development, including integration, equality, and economic, of course, economic development. And development needed to have these three pillars. Fortunately, in 2001, John Hawkes published work that was a revolution for the concept of human sustainable development, saying that there was a fourth pillar, that is culture. Without the cultural dimension, we cannot talk about human sustainable development. During this talk, this conversation, I'm sure that we will be able to convince you that culture is not the fourth pillar. It is the roots, it is the source of everything for the other three vectors. And I think this definition is everywhere. It is the condition necessary, and without the cultural dimension we cannot have human development. It cannot be integrated or accepted in any human community. The concept of culture, once we've talked about development, I wanted to give you a definition of culture that shows the level of complexity and the many realities that we have. And the Declaration of Freiburg from the United Nations establishes the cultural rights for all human beings. And the definition of culture is a complex of values, beliefs, convictions, languages, know-hows and arts, traditions, institutions and styles of life through which a group of people can express their humanity and the significance that is given to their experience and development. So what is not culture? Everything is culture. And then we have other tests, other essays of linking development and culture. You probably remember a few years ago the Sustainable Development, the Millennium Goals for the horizon of 2015, so that hunger was banished from the earth, certain commitments that were acquired. And when we reached 2015, we knew that we weren't going to achieve those goals. That was a first attempt, and before 2015 the international community started working with that first experience in the creation of a different agenda, 2030. I don't know if you've heard about this commitment. It was adopted by the General Assembly of United Nations in 2015. All the countries signed these commitments so that in 2030 the world is a better place, so that all of us here can really be human, and so that we can really achieve sustainable human development. That 2030 agenda that was the fruit of many negotiations, transactions, sacrifices, because a good agreement always has to have the benefits for all of them. And within this agenda we have the Sustainable Development Goals, with also 179 goals. The countries that were part of the General Assembly that signed this commitment, in the goals, culture is not the protagonist of any of these goals, but in 2015 more than 120 countries, experts, institutions created a platform called The Future That We Want, and it included the culture, and this was their demand, to include culture in this agenda. The cultural dimension in this agenda is undeniable. In the goal number 11, it is said that we must achieve sustainable cities and communities for 2030. And it says that cities are the creation of many things, of social development, ideas, economic development, etc. So here, in a summary, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, all of us are committed towards this. The international community has been committed towards this. And we are here for to talk about the change of paradigm that would lead to the realization of these goals cannot occur without the cultural dimension. Cultural dimension, profound cultural changes necessary, a change in mindset or in behaviors, collectively or individually, always means that there's confrontation in reality that has also an emotional impact. Without this impact, we don't really change. So without culture, I am sure that we can all agree that this change will not take place. Cultural expressions as a vehicle to convey many messages in the earth, culture to be able to change mindsets, to improve the quality of life of people. And without going into further detail, I would like to introduce the 6 people who are here with us, so that we can start a conversation, not only among us. You are more than welcome to participate freely, so that this is a real exchange of ideas between all of us. I'm going to start with the beginning of this panel. To your left, we have Grete Berskland. She's the Director of Innovation Norway. It is the innovation agency of the government of Norway in Madrid. She has a wide international experience. She's worked in China and Norway, and she's an expert in the Norway model of collaboration between the public and private sector. She's participated in several projects of collaboration between both sectors, trying to find sustainable solutions for the development also of smart cities. In 2019, Oslo will be the European Green Capital, and for this reason, Grete will be able to share information here with us regarding interesting innovation and initiatives that are being launched in the Norwegian capital. We also have Gunnar Madsen with us. During his professional career, he's done everything in the world of music. He was a roadie, booker, manager of different Danish groups, and then he became the manager of the music office of Aarhus, a city that has been completely transformed by music and by its influence. He will now talk about this probably. He is the co-founder of the Danish Music Offices and Transport Support, the director of Vauxhall in Aarhus. He is the member of the community of the Liverpool Arts Institute and co-founder and president from 2010 to 2017 of NOMEX, the Nordic Music Expert Offices. He is also the co-founder of ROSA, the Danish Rock Council. He has been the director since 1984 till 1990 of this council of Danish rock and manager. He has also been the leader of the Spot Festival since 1996, president of Strom, that started out being an electronic music festival, and that currently works as an organization for the electronic music, organizing events all around Denmark and during the whole year. He is also the co-founder of Music Expert Denmark. Next to him, we have José Almanza. He is the creator of the innovation movement based on people and innovation called Caórdica. Before, he co-funded Impact Hub Madrid from the Bench Games, Pocket University, and recently Loom House as an ecosystem of innovators based on the theory of holacracy. He will explain what this theory is about now. He is also funding Willever as the movement who gives tools to people so that they can change the world through the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. The theory of Jose regarding innovation proposes a cultural change in organizations, empowering people to activate their essence and making their ideas flow towards the top of the pyramid. He's been a teacher in Instituto de Empresa, and Willever also empowers individuals and entities with technology to be able to have a social impact around the world. This technology is based on a digital platform for management, reporting and measurement of social impact aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. Next to him we have Mauro. He is an architect, co-director of the Office of Architecture Estudio SIC 2009 and Estudio FAM. He's also the co-creator of the platform incubator of citizen initiatives. He also promotes innovation and through social promotion towards the public space. Since 2017, he has been co-leading the European project Mares de Madrid in the framework of the European Union Urban Innovative Actions. He also co-produced the digital platform of citizen innovation, civics.cc, that has been awarded with an award from the ULAC Foundation. He writes in digital magazines as La Ciudad Viva, El Estado Mental, and he's been a speaker in several countries, Spain, France, Latin America, US, etc. His work is constantly updated, and he has published many books and magazines in Asia, America and Europe. Marisol is a sociologist. She works in the City Council of Madrid since 1987. She has worked in different areas of planning and development of public policies, including public health, education, environment, mobility, public space, historic heritage, etc. From her different responsibilities, she has developed strategies and projects for the prevention and promotion of health, environmental education, transversal projects, promotion of mobility and new models of governance. From 2004 until 2015, she managed the education department for sustainable development of the City Council of Madrid, and since 2015 she's the general director of urban landscape and cultural heritage of the area of culture and sports of the City Council of Madrid. She has been working on rehabilitation projects, historic heritage management, new cultural infrastructures, projects that have to do with urban landscape, urban management, etc. And finally, I would like to introduce Marta. Marta García Aro, here you are.
Aquí estás.
Con lo que
aquí está.
Sí.
Marta García Aro es desde...
Since 2015, she is responsible for the Spanish office of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. It is an international network sponsored by United Nations to be able to promote sustainable development globally. Marta manages the activities and coordinates the different members of the Spanish network. Previously, she has developed her professional career in the cultural sector, where she has led and coordinated different projects for the Museo Picasso Foundation and the Museo Reina Sofía. She has also collaborated with the creation of Foundation Intra. It's an NGO that works towards the integration of people at risk of social exclusion. She has a degree in economics and art history by the University of Valencia, and she has a master in the management and communication of cultural policies by the University LUMSA. So we know a little bit more about our 6 guests. I wanted to ask you a first question that is more personal or human. And what moment during your lives, during which experience or project or during which reflection did you reach the conclusion that culture and sustainability go hand in hand? It can be a personal experience or something human, I don't know. Would you like to share this with us? For all of us? Yes, all of us.
Thank you. Well, I don't know if I can define one moment where that thought occurred to me, but having worked in this area for many years, I think one thing I've realized is that being a relatively small country like we are in Norway, with very high levels of trust between people, very low levels of hierarchy, so it's very easy for a regular person to talk to the mayor of the city or a minister in the government. That this has been a big advantage when it comes to creating change recently when it comes to city development. And we have a lot of, I won't go into all the examples now because I guess we will go into that later, but of course in Norway we went from having almost no electric cars within a handful of years to now more than half of all new cars sold in Norway are electric. And it's the biggest market, not just per person, but in total volumes when it comes to electric cars in the world, after China. And of course, the population of Norway can fit into a small pocket in Beijing. So that means we have a lot of e-vehicles, and that didn't happen by itself. It happened through a culture of collaboration, which I can get back to maybe later in the discussion.
Yes, I don't know quite exactly when I had my first experience or my first thought about it, but basically I think that the way we live is culture. So in that sense, it has been the green agenda, whatever it is, it's a part of the cultural thinking in a society or globally. But my first meeting, I think, where I considered something about this was 20 years ago when the municipality of Aarhus decided that we had to, when we threw our garbage out, we had to put it in different boxes, right? Some garbage in one box and others, and we did that for 2 years very carefully, my wife and I, but we wondered why when we brought it out it was put in the same box. So that was the first time I wondered, well, this is an issue, but do we have any solutions, or what are we doing, or how do we work with our ambitions and make a proper solution at the same time? It's about timing, and the same issue you have when you work with culture like art, or for me with music, it's a question to have the timing on everything, so that the people, the production of the culture or the art is timed so it goes along with the people. So that's my point of it, that is to find this this natural point between what we need to do and when people think that's what we want to do.
Bien, en cambio está.
Okay, so I'll shift to Spanish. In year 2005, I don't know if you remember, but the world was very competitive. A group of 8 people that were quite heterogeneous, 4 boys, 4 girls, from 11 different nationalities, 4 different religions, came together, and we thought that we wanted to change the world into a collaborative world. We started to develop a methodology that didn't have a name. Today it's called co-creation. And we started to do what's called design thinking. We didn't have a name then. Luckily, one of the co-founders came from the Cirque du Soleil from Canada. We had a community of 100 people here in Madrid, and we created our own canvas. This is the canvas business model. It was written by a founder of Half Rotterdam. We were creating Impact Hub, and with this plan, we moved, we went to meet with the relevant authorities in our city, the region of Madrid, the town hall, the ministry, and we presented the plan. We said, well, we want to create a space where the world changes from competitive to collaborative, and they were listening to us with their eyes open and tenderly. But when we went, when I went back to the town hall, somebody said, these guys are hippies that are really high. I don't know how this could be translated into Danish or Norwegian or whatever, but I was surprised, I was shocked, because I was believing in that history, in that story, but people usually have the innovation and creation spirit absolutely asleep. They had asked me, where can I see this? And I told them, no, we still haven't done it. As far as we know, nobody has done this. It's something brand new. And I realized that what we needed was to wake up this creation spirit. So Impact Hub was born then. We developed Impact Hub then. It was the first co-working space that has existed in Spain. It's present in 108 cities in the world. And in 2015, 10 years later, I co-founded with my sister Loom House. It's a space where we basically try to extrapolate the creation and innovation processes of cultural industries to take them to different industries. And we lever, because, well, this is why you've called me, it's born at the same stage. It's about creating a tool that can develop the creation spirit of people so that people can change the world. So my experience comes from learning by doing, basically. Well, I don't know how I would explain this in a simple way, but it has something to do with what you've just said, but it's about the idea that we can't think that people individually will be able to do this on their own. So we've been understanding why people go in groups to do things beyond their job, their family. We've been doing this for 10 years, and there comes a time when you wonder, why do people come together for this type of things? And we see something that we call effective urbanism, that has to do with this idea of why collective processes, cultural, ecological processes take place in cities, why people go to the do things on Saturday, ecological things on Saturdays, why do people come together during the weekend. And I could understand this with a very personal experience that happened during this summer with my 2 children when we went to the sea. I have 2 children, Leon and Manuela, and Leon saw a plastic bag in the sea, and she said, we can't do this, Dad. We can't do this at home, etc. And Manuela doesn't pay attention because she wants to look after the animals, etc. So what I mean is that every person has an effective relationship with different things, and we tend to think that people have to fulfill, I don't know how many ODS, who have to be sensitive to many things, but in reality we are sensitive to a narrow range of things. So from our point of view, the fact of doing better cities has to do with the fact that people use their capabilities in the best way they can. So we could have a part of a society that could be more effective and a more disaffective part, so to speak. So we should work on this through actions, projects that could generate another city. So there won't be a change if we are not more aware of what we want to do, where we put our energy, etc. This is my perception.
Marisol? Well, my reflection is linked to my professional career in public policies. When we started talking about sustainable development with Rio 92, I've been working in environmental policies for 15 years, and the reflection that I did in those days is that even nowadays we know quite a lot about what is happening worldwide. Sustainability, we've got the panel of climate change, different scientists, experts that alert us on the challenges, the risks, etc. But how this information is conveyed to citizens is the biggest challenge. It is the big, we have a lot of knowledge, but we don't really know how to face this change in the rules of the game regarding our lifestyles, etc. So that is the biggest challenge regarding cultural change and public policies. We've been working on sustainability. We've been focusing a lot on technology, but I think this focus is not right. I think, as other colleagues have mentioned, how we generate collective thoughts to be able to change mindsets is much more interesting than just the knowledge that has to be conveyed purely. So this challenge regarding how we have to undertake this change, the agenda of habitat, to have people in the center of public policies, is a shift in the paradigm. If we have people in the center of everything, we have to think about how we're going to generate public policies with people being protagonists of these policies, and this will not happen at an individual level. It will happen collectively. The knowledge to be able to change behaviors, mindset, has to come from a collective approach. This is our biggest challenge, I think, within and outside public administrations, and this is, I think, the line on which we're working on right now. Thank you. Well, you've asked a personal question, and I'm going to give a personal answer. As Gunnar was mentioning, 20 years ago, he thought about this, and I was awakened many years later. Only 3 years ago, I had the revelation, the epiphany, with regard to the concept of sustainable development, that you already knew this concept, but for me in 2015, when we were preparing the 2030 agenda of sustainable agenda, and it just came into my hands by chance. This also has to do with my professional career. I come from the sphere of visual arts. I was working in a museum, and thanks to the initiative of the Council of Museums, there was a challenge for us to dedicate the Day of Museums in 2015 to their contribution with regard to a sustainable society. So this made us reflect on this subject, but this was not the end of this. In my institution, none of my colleagues have heard about these topics. So when we wanted to think about how our museum contributed towards sustainable development in the city, they couldn't really understand why we were talking about these topics. So we didn't really do much about it, and this was a bit frustrating for me. So I decided to say, well, if from the cultural sphere I'm not going to be able to talk about sustainable development, well then I will move on to the other side of things and we'll start working at sustainable development, and I'll talk about culture from that point of view. And you represent the mix of culture, sustainable development. How then you understand that even if culture can be used as an instrument, it is the means through which people can modify their behaviors and mindset and take action. So I wanted to ask you, from your current responsibility, how do you think that you can contribute to this impact or this driver of the sustainability? The concept of culture is very wide, as you've explained, so I don't really want to create a revolution, but as a responsible of the Spanish network, we've established reasonable goals. We want to raise awareness regarding the 2030 agenda in the cultural sphere, that we want them to integrate all of this in their DNA so that also the cultural practices are more sustainable. These are the objectives that we've established. In Spain, there's a lack of knowledge regarding 2030 agenda. Each party or each stakeholder is involved or interested in different aspects, and as we were saying before, these goals are related to each other, and maybe you might be more interested in the social part, the first row of goals. This first row will not be possible without the second row and is also related to the third row. The same question for the other guests. From the point of view of the projects that you're undertaking, how are you contributing to the mobilization of sustainability in cities? Right now, we are working on 4 lines of work. I'm going to give 4 examples of what we're doing. First of all, the design of cultural equipments. We go beyond an architectural project. We're talking about public libraries, for example. We have a public tender in the Association of Architects with 3 libraries. This has been a work that has been done during 3 years. How do we understand the libraries of the 21st century, including 4 basic criteria that have to do with cultural and sustainability. As related to this, we also have energy efficiency, and we include 3 more criteria: how we can create these cultural equipments from the gender perspective, including assistance, caregiving, social charges, and another criteria has to do with citizen participation. The libraries not only have to be designed with the criteria of architects or other functional criteria, they have to include the visions of the users of those facilities. We organize different participatory processes before, during and after the design of the facilities. Another important criteria has to do with how this cultural venue or facility gives value to its environment, and how to take into account the urban space that is nearby. In this way, Nowadays, we can see people thinking about a singular or particular building, but not thinking about the surroundings of that building. So when we open up this to participation, we include other criteria that go beyond just technical requirements. This is one of the lines of work. We also have other lines of work, such as including projects called Imagina Madrid, Imagine Madrid, to try to have different approaches. And during the festivities of the city, Veranos de la Villa has also taken into account other criteria such as decentralization. I could talk a lot more, but I'll finish here.
Acabo de llegar de Nueva Orleans.
Well, we've just come back from New Orleans and we've been discussing about this. So we have to think that cities are not objects that are just standing still and human people just go around. No, our actions create a city. A city like Madrid has festivals almost every week. So if we see the city from the festival perspective, the big, the ones, the small ones, the ones that are inside, outside, some kind of an easy thing, like for example, the set away festivals. I mean, zero waste. He said zero waste festival without waste. It's something very specific that can be tackled. So how do we face that? So the city would be transformed, because we have to think about how generating a zero waste festival. It's a very simple thing, but at the same time it's very complex. For example, Veranos de la Villa festival is marvelous. The experiences that we are having in Madrid when we go to different parks that we've never been, to have experiences that are public, but for me are really emotional when I am there. And what, as regards what I have to say in this aspect, it has to do with the previous thing. The project that we have and the project that we're developing with higher impact in terms of sustainability and resilience is the project Mares de Madrid, Seas of Madrid, and it starts with the idea of this affection. I mean, there are 4 innovation spaces in Madrid. We have recovered 4 obsolete facilities at different stages, and what we do is not to think that there are innovation ecosystems where people will move. We focus on specific things that we are interested. For example, mobility. We start to think about pedestrians and food, responsible people, etc. Farms, for example, the 4 spaces that we have there. I mean, it's like aggregators where the initiatives that are at the different districts of Madrid can come together, and the space is key for these things to happen. We have forgotten this many times, but it is what in the end can generate these places where the initiatives, people, companies come together because of interests that lay in the same place. And what they change and what they produce is you have different practices, not only in the entrepreneurial point of view, in terms of urban transformation, but also to see how in these places, experiences what we learn, we can relate everything with this urban co-production idea. It means what I do, I mean, at the event, at home, the institution, or wherever I am. This is what I have to say about this project. I think that we all agree on the fact that when the United Nations created the development goals that are very beautiful, very healthy, etc., probably the United Nations were thinking about the fact that these goals were going to be accomplished by institutions, great nations, and I think that we all agree on the fact that this won't be the case. These goals won't be accomplished by nations, by cities, by big institutions, by big companies. They have to be accomplished by people. But there's something relevant here. I think that we all agree on the fact that everything that is not measured and everything that is not reported is useless. We can try to do many things, we can do many things, but we can't measure and report we don't understand it, and this is very important. When we created Wherever, the first thing we tried was to create a tool to measure the social impact, and this is possible now. I think that we've made it. In fact, it's working in companies like BBVA or very big companies with 180,000 companies. Miami-Dade College, for example, the city of Miami uses Wherever, and we can measure this with technology. We can measure the social impact. And we can create a social curriculum of every single person. And this social curriculum from Wherever can tell you your contribution to every ODS in your country, in the world. When you see a zero, you see a 0 point and a huge bunch of zeros, you think, well, this is a nightmare, this is a disaster, they haven't done anything. But if we take it to points, it sounds much better. We created Wherever points, and it's curious because companies are starting to have a value. And on the other side, we worry about the fact that companies, institutions, schools have a non-financial report, something that is key. In competitively speaking, is very relevant. Now there's a law shift that forces companies with more than 500 people or 40 million of a budget to have financial reports at the company's register. And if there's going to be a public bid, the new law from the 9th of March, they have to measure environmental and social criteria apart from the price. This is an important shift. But for this to generate the result that we expect, we need a tool or a group of tools that give us a possibility of measuring and reporting. We've created this tool, but everything is based on people. This is what we are trying to contribute from Wherever.
I think there are different angles into this for our case. We are running a big festival in the city, in the heart of Aarhus, and if I should describe the perspective we are looking into trying to fulfill the goals of the UN, there will be maybe two ways of looking into it. The one is the practical way that you develop your festival, about your products and how you behave and how you consume things and stuff you can actually do better from day to day or from year to year, and that will be one of our goals. But I think working with culture, in this case music, it's just as much important to find out how do you work with the mindset about this on a democratic level, on an artistic level, on a level where you respect the integrity of the art as well. Because I would think there would be no really progress if we have to use the art as just as a rambock, as a tool to press something through. You need to. The better you respect the integrity, the better you can create or support the mindset of this agenda. And I think that's very important, because behind our good political will to create a green world and stuff, there are still huge, let's say, political and economical agendas that are different from what we think. So if we don't try to cooperate with the artists in their position, not to save them, but to respect that there are different angles, because that's what the art always told us. You can have your point of view through art very freely. Maybe it's not funny down here, but in Denmark it's funny. We have an organization, a small organization of musicians which are very high ranked, but they are smokers, all of them. They have a small unit called the Yellow Nail, because of the nicotine, and they advocate very strongly that against the prohibition of smoking. And of course, I don't agree with them, but I think we all have to be aware that if we don't have this wide range discussion of the different positions, we will have very difficult to raise the real that the people will be behind our goals and our stuff. We have to understand that this is a long travel. This is not just a question about having a political decision, do this or do that or change that within a few years. It's very fine to have political goals, and I am very much for the goals. But on a daily basis, we need to be very to have space to let people into the fight, do their own decisions, and that's where I think that you. I think that we already see that, at least in Denmark, that if you measure over 20 years, the mindset has really changed. Even we don't have any policy, really, because ordinary people, they have a lot of this is logic. This is goes along with the feelings how to live. So that's what I think we can do a little bit, being a big festival, being presenting, being producing a lot of artists. We can be a place where people feel it's the goal are in progress, but you can be there even you don't really know where your position are, even if you're not perfect, right? Because I think that's what we can do with the culture. You can show that it's being on the move, and it's okay to be on the move. It's not just because I'm afraid of being too politically correct. That's the other side of the game, right?
Thank you. Grete, please.
Yeah, so I think my point of view is coming more from the commercial and the industrial side, and I completely agree that for people to change their behaviors, they should be able to have a real choice. And if you take it, if you look 10, 20 years back in Norway when it came to electric cars, I think there were a lot of people who were interested in having electric cars, but they were not really available. They couldn't really go over long distances. So where do you charge them? How do they work in the cold? And the industry said, well, we can deliver all of this, but we need some kind of a scale in order for it to be worth it for us to make all these adaptations. And that's where the government came in. In Norway, it's extremely expensive to own a car. They are taxed heavily. Just a normal car can cost up to 80 to 100,000 euros for a basic car. But you don't have any tax on e-vehicle. We have really big tolls to go on most roads in Norway. You have to pay for ferries and bridges. If you have an e-vehicle, you don't pay toll. You can park for free in the city center. You can drive in the public transport lane. And they just made this decision. And it's incredible how you didn't make anything more expensive. You just made something else a bit more cheap. And it took maybe less than 10 years, and it's completely changed our society. So I think that's another example, and we're talking about measuring things. Oslo, which you mentioned is the green capital of Europe in 2019, they are the first city who have started, made their own CO2 budget. So they're really going to measure in everything that the city does how is it affecting their emissions. And what they found is that, of course, the CO2 emissions from cars are already going down very much. And if you look at total CO2 emissions from transport, there was maybe 30% coming from personal vehicles, or a little more. And the second one was emissions from vehicles that were in construction sites, because we have in any big city, you have construction sites all over town, and they emit a lot of CO2. And so Oslo municipality, one of the public agencies that build healthcare facilities, they went to the industry and said, well, if we put in our next public tender that the next construction site has to be emission-free if you're going to be able to do this project, can you do it? And they said, maybe not for one project, but if you can make it for all your projects in Norway, yeah, we can do it. Give us 2 years. And there you have this collaboration, a high level of trust, and they said, okay, yeah, we do that. And they did it for all the construction sites. This was, I think, 1.5 years ago, and next year you will have the first emission-free construction site. So I think sometimes it's this of creating enough scale that it becomes interesting for industry, and then later it also becomes easier for consumers to make the right choice because they actually have a choice. Just like saying that you don't want consumers to use cars, but then you have no public transport, what's the choice? So I think there's a balance there of what an individual can do and what we can try to influence our society to do. And I think in that respect, in the Nordics, in Denmark also, they have gone quite far in using public procurement as a tool to create change.
Juana, sí. Simplemente quería decir que como
I just wanted to say that I haven't mentioned specific projects. I just wanted to take the floor to mention two projects because Grete and Jose have been talking about measures. That is the strong point of our network. I'm moving away from culture, and I'm not feeling very well by doing this, but there's an interesting project. I also have the possibility of showing a slide, I think. One of the things that we do is to measure the level of sustainability in countries. This agenda has been created for states, and states have to fulfill this agenda. For this to happen, there has to be an assessment and a follow-up. From our network, we are trying to highlight where the potential problems are. One of our flagship projects in the network is to measure the level of fulfillment for each one of the SDGs around the world, and our country does not fulfill any of the 17 SDGs. This is based on different indicators that have been agreed upon with United Nations, but is, I think, the first time that we have a comparison between all the different countries. And I'm going to try to provoke my Scandinavian colleagues. I am going to show the panel of the country that is top one, and you might think that all the objectives are green, but if we look at the next slide, this is Sweden, number one out of 193 countries, and Sweden only fulfills 2 goals right now. This is the report from 2018. This is not directly related to culture, but I think it is very interesting with regard to measuring. This can also be conveyed to the cultural sphere. We, of course, have a long road ahead. We did the same exercise for all the different cities of Spain. We've got panels for each one of the Spanish cities to see how much they fulfill these 17 SDGs. This, if we measured the level of sustainability of the cultural sphere, I'm sure that we could also detect many problems. I'm not really going to act as a moderator. I'm just going to contradict what Jose has said. He was mentioning the countries being the ones committing towards the 2030 agenda, the goals. They are going to be evaluated. He said that it will be the individuals, not the cities or the states. I think that people, the individuals who live in communities in society, I believe strongly in action, individual action. I think as a person we have a capacity to influence that is not always taken into account. It might not be enough. It might be struggle, if the different communities where we live don't give us spaces, tools where our commitment can be possible and fulfilled, we probably won't have an impact. But picking up what Marta was saying regarding the assessment of things, the measuring, up to what point the cultural actions, everything that happens to us happens in a city. Anything that happens in life will always happen to us in a city or in a village. And in the Spanish Federation of Municipalities, I have a responsibility in that association. We have a guide to be able to assess policies locally. And when we did this assessment, we worked in the Agenda 2021 regarding culture. You've probably heard about this. And we assessed, we offered tools to the cities so that they could do self-assessment regarding territory, social, economic aspects with regard to social participation as engines also of cultural shift, innovation, also to generate identity, and regarding the proposal of social innovation solutions that would enrich all these goals. And right now we are focusing on equality from the point of view of local policies, sustainability of cultural actions in all the different vectors that are related to sustainability, and we also want to work on connectivity now that there's a lack of population in many rural areas.
Thank you very much. I love this discussion. I would like to see what people think about this. Well, when we said this way of thinking, I would like to connect it with culture. I think that what we're trying is a cultural shift. Sorry. So, I'm sorry. The culture is what makes everything homogeneous. What's happening with the SDGs is top-down. We create SDGs, we have this goals, and we impose these goals to citizens. They are the ones who are going to accomplish them. When we were speaking about activating the responsible spirit of people, is because countries are not responsible and cities are not responsible. People are responsible. People that live in cities and that rule countries and who develop the policies in countries, etc. We're speaking about the cultural shift that is the bottom up. The people from the bottom are starting to have an influence and make things happen bottom up. And this is an important change. When we went to talk to the president of the Miami-Dade College, it's a very important person, and the university and colleges are very relevant in the US. We explained to him that when I'm going to hire a student or whatever, I can see if this student has studied or not, if he's a genius, if he's not a genius. But if this person after a hurricane has gone to the street, he helped other people tidy everything up, or did something that generated an impact that contributed to an SDG, I would never be able to know that. So what we propose is if every student could have a tool that could measure and report their contribution to SDGs, I could know that and hire this person. This person that is called Eduardo Padron told us this is a very European mindset, because here the most important thing is to access university. When you are at a good university, maybe you're going to have a good job. We have to talk to high schools because maybe we have a problem of talent. We have difficulties to identify talent. So if students are able to do it, we'll be able to identify it. And we were able to explain why we were doing well ever, and this is why we were trying to change the next generation's DNA. If a 16 or 17-year-old boy goes out to the street, generates a social impact, and is able to access a better university, or somebody out of a university is able to have a better job thanks to a social impact, for this person, a social impact is the same to an immediate reward. And if we are able to include this code in the next generation, these people won't need to go through courses. Maybe they won't even need to agree on the SDGs because they will be accountable. They will have a responsible planet. So the fact of measuring my contribution makes me more responsible to see if I want to contribute more or less, because in the end, the SDGs is something that we have to take care of, and if we do it, the planet will be viable in 2030, but we are free to choose what we want to contribute. And what we say is that we needed a tool to have the freedom of contributing more or less, because I still think that the basis of everything are people. People make cities, countries, institutions, and what we have to change is people and not countries or institutions.
Do we want to continue the conversation? Go ahead. Yes, I would like to pick up on her comment.
Un poquito mejor, un poco peor.
Maybe in 2030 it will be different, of course. When I've seen the list of the countries that are in the ranking, it's just European countries, the ones that appear on the list. So they are global SDGs in a very European context. It's like the exhibition that we have downstairs about robots in Telefónica. I think that is key to understand what we are talking about. There's an exhibition that I recommend on the 3rd floor about robots. It's amazing. And they say in Asia, technology and robots are really something that are doing now. I mean, they are moved for that. And in Europe, we're quite conservative with everything that has to do with technology, robotics, etc. There are two cultures that express a collective affection in terms of for example, in terms of robots that are quite different. So, we were speaking about how can we start dealing with these changes, these modifications. I don't know if you agree on the fact that we are speaking about people, because it's a co-production between people, where they live, the country, the culture they live in. So it's something more complex. So with this fever that we are living with the SDGs that are very interesting, we have not to cheat on ourselves thinking that this could generate policies that will penetrate in all channels, etc., in an easy way. So it's very interesting to see this, so that we can see how things happen. This happens here, but in France, there's something different, in Asia, etc. So how a relationship between knowledge, the cultural knowledge, placed at different societies, cultures, etc., can be related to this. I think that if somebody knows about this, maybe they could explain it a little bit. How this SDGs globalization is related to differences and conflicts and everything that really exists, ethnical, gender conflicts. This is what we are doing. This would be a question for who knows something about this.
Vamos ahí para reflexionarla cada uno. Me parece interesante.
Yes, super interesting reflection. Gunnar before was smiling when Jose was talking. Maybe he was being very firm in what he was saying, Jose. I don't know.
Vale. Decía Marisol, dinos.
Sí, yo voy a discrepar con José.
Yes, I'm going to disagree with Jose. How do we tackle global challenges locally? I think that is key. How do we act locally in a global world? I don't think we have to look for the best talents. I don't think that change is going to be in individuals in an isolated way. It is more about how individuals are going to unite to be able to make things happen. I think that having integration experiences will lead to change. I'm going to give some examples on which we're working on right now. We're all learning how, when you build a library, the knowledge of a neighbor, of a specific neighborhood that is knowledgeable and has read a lot, etc. How can that knowledge be united with the knowledge of an architect and create collective knowledge, and how can we be citizens and architects at the same time, and we can create collectively, because this creates equality in the work, in different levels of experience, different points of view. I liked that Norwegian experience. We have a very high level of trust and a very horizontal or low hierarchy, and to be able to act collectively we need to create trust. I think that it is a way of understanding this contributes, but I don't think that big cultural changes are going to be individual. I think they have to come from collective creation, to be able to unite experiences, works, etc. From the cultural perspective, we're also working on climate change. Marta's mentioned this. An experience with experts in climate change. We're going to be working with artists to be able to generate new proposals for the cities. What is interesting about this? The artists are going to be the leaders of the project, not the experts in climate change. So the artists will give way to the transformation and will open new approaches. When we join disciplines, spheres, people from different backgrounds, we generate transformation. Up to now, we came from a world in which everything was very partial, divided in different disciplines, and this is related to our mindsets. We are either mathematicians, philosophists, and at the same time society is very complex, and knowledge is specialized. And I think this is the current challenge. If the society is complex, let's try to approach these topics in a complex way. So this is why I don't fully agree with José.
Estamos completamente de acuerdo en lo que hemos.
I think we totally agree on what we think. When we say that it's about activating the collective intelligence, the first step to activate the collective intelligence is to become individuals, to empower ourselves to be these individuals that are going to solve these SDGs. Next time will be when we move from being, when we are able to activate the collective intelligence layer. That is what you're mentioning now. With this collective intelligence, but being so heterogeneous, that this is what you're saying, when you can put many different people thinking around the same purpose about something. This is when we enrich yourself, when you are different people, when you're able to reconnect with your innovative and creative spirit, and it's when you feel able to solve something as big as SDGs and not expecting a country or a third party to solve them. So I think that we really are saying the same, but the only thing is that the second moment, first of all, is how you're empowering yourself as an individual, how you're waking up this innovative spirit, and second step would be how you activate this collective intelligence of a community, is to change the notion of a nation or a city to collective intelligence. When there's a collective intelligence that starts walking, okay, but from the individual point of view, different individuals, not identical individuals. Since that we are at a country level, we are all the same. It sounds very well, politically speaking, but in order to accomplish all this, we need our individuality and to be very different among us to contribute. But this is why I'm saying that we are more aligned on this fact.
I would like to give the floor to Gunnar and Grete, and also open up the debate, the floor to the audience. Do we have more microphones? Go ahead, Gunnar.
To say that when we're talking about how to develop the green agenda, I think certainly it's a question of having as well political from the top programs to implement for the citizens or the people to use and to go into. But I also believe that people do it on their own and personal initiatives. That's fine. I just want to once again address about the artist involvement, the cultural artists in this thing. That the risk to backfire something is when you let's see. The coming year in Denmark, we'll see a lot of political programs trying to develop this issue, and they will tell the artist, well, if you go into this area and you do something really nice art, you get money. And this, on the one hand, is very tempting. Of course it is, because they try to make a living, but that's where I try to warn a bit that we have to consider as well the green agenda as our, let's say, our democratic freedom and our artistic integrity, because it can backfire that if everybody we think we have to produce into this agenda, we have to live into this agenda, and that's where we need a lot of artists to do it in their way, to show that that we don't want a product from them. Because I think that is a bit dangerous. But of course, it's one of the issues you have on many levels. It's not prohibited to ask an artist to produce into something, but we just have to be careful on this issue, I think, to respect that maybe it's sometimes better it takes 2 years more than to press something through.
I completely agree. Grete, please.
Yeah, and but I think in order to influence people or consumers to want to make a right choice, providing they have one, is that you also have to create a sense of urgency. And the Nordic countries that you mentioned, we have a very high quality of life. People have a good standard of living. And my experience when I moved back after being 5 years in China in 2006 to Norway was that this, even though we have a lot of policies and we are doing a lot of things, this sense of urgency when it came to climate change, when it came to plastic in the ocean, it was not really there among everyday people. And for example, the ocean, which we have one of the biggest coastlines in the world in Norway, we have always depended on fishing, the Vikings on the sea, and it was not until I think it was last year there was a whale in Norway that landed on the beach that had died, and when they opened up this whale, it had starved to death. And the reason it had starved to death was that it was full of plastic bags inside the stomach, and it was not able to take up any nutrition. And they showed very graphic photos of the stomach contents of this whale, of these plastic bags, and then they started to bring on statistics about how much plastic is in the ocean, how will this affect what we eat in the years to come. And I think that was really that was one thing that created a sense of urgency and awareness, where now if you have the government then going in and saying we want to change a policy where maybe something that you have been used to will be more expensive or more inconvenient or whatever, people are willing to accept it if they have that sense of urgency. And that was one example, but I think you can do that in many different countries where there are different triggers and contacts that make people feel it. And it might be different even in different parts of a country. So I think that creating a sense of urgency and finding good examples that people can rally around locally or nationally is also key. Because sometimes if it goes top down, like you said, not all the decisions will be popular or appreciated unless the people really understand why they are important.
Marta, y pido el micrófono también aquí. Dinos, Marta.
Estoy totalmente de acuerdo con Gunnar en que hay que dejar también libertad a los artistas para que expresen estas cosas como quieran.
We need to give space to the different artists. They need to have space so that they can express themselves. And I think that from my position, when the cultural sphere is too literal with regard to the SDGs, it is less interesting few weeks ago in Madrid, we organized a sort of event that involved a whale in plastic that had been in the river, and that in theory it talked about climate change, and I thought it wasn't really right. It was too much, maybe in another context, somewhere that is less well known, with a big room. I went to this exhibition and I thought, well, this is going to be boring, but I started looking into that show, and there was 10 meters long, and it was at the same size as another big whale that was found on the Spanish coast that had died also due to plastic. And in this glass showcase, there were all the plastic objects, all the things that they'd found from different places in Spain, and this room conveyed a much stronger message than this other thing that they did with the whale, the plastic whale in Madrid. So I think that we have to talk about this agenda, the rankings, the measurements. What I mean by this is that the cultural sphere, the creative sector, is co-responsible with regard to sustainable development. The agenda has been created by governments, but individuals, universities, institutions are also responsible, and the cultural sphere is also responsible, and they can do a lot to disseminate this message through the different works that they do through cultural managers, and then everyday life they can also be more responsible, more eco-friendly, and open up the debate. I think that the cultural sphere has related to this Agenda 2030, and they're doing many things, and I'm quite proud of this.
The threefold things. First of all, is that to me, we're missing a key pillar in culture and sustainability. This is education. If we don't have education, cultural is useless. Culture, to regular citizens, would think that is bureaucratized by the administration. I think that's crazy. Another thing about Norway, if the electrical vehicles do not pay anything, who pays the ticket? Another question about the assessment of people. Who evaluates these criteria in every person? Are they assessed by the person, him or herself, or is there a court that performs this evaluation? And the fourth bullet would be the collective intelligence and collaboration. To have collaboration, we must have an equivalent level, and we always must have a leader that is in charge of innovation and creativity. We can't mix elements that are different in terms of knowledge, because we would go nowhere. We must have specialists that are able to collaborate with a high level of knowledge. We can't mix everything up.
¿Deseáis contestar? Dejamos las preguntas abiertas.
If you want to answer, we leave things answers open. Okay, so whoever does not evaluate does not assess. It does not evaluate because evaluating would be almost judging. We are not trying to assess anything. Whoever tells you about your level of contribution. So basically, what it does, not to make it highly complex, because we are speaking about algorithms and an AI software, it's quite deep. What we are able to measure is hours that people dedicate to contribute to SDGs. So with these hours, compared to the hours that are calculated that would be necessary to accomplish these goals in every country and in the world, we can correlate them. So a different thing is that every hour there's an algorithm that, for example, if you are having an impact, or if you are performing an activity with other people and they can perform a 5-star rating, the algorithm says that you have created a great impact because you have made a great effort. If you have a great knowledge because you have a PhD in engineering, the algorithm would understand that you have generated more cooperation because of your knowledge. And for example, the algorithm would understand that the hour 300 would have a higher impact than hour 1. But it's just for the matter of information. I mean, it tells you, well, out of this cake with a 100%, you have a 0.0002% and happy, and that's it. Well, and I love everything that has to do with collective intelligence. Maybe it's, but well, that's for you, I think, and collaboration.
Si hay alguna persona más que quiere
Do we have any more questions? Well, I'm going to answer 2 points. I think there's a lack of education. I think we need to have culture and education. They both work separately. We need to create programs with culture and education developed together. I totally agree. Culture being bureaucratized by administration, well, yes. I think, what do we really understand by cultural management? This can be a broader dimension. From the administration, we've had a paternalistic approach. I think we're going to try to change this perspective, and the administration should support cultural projects that work hand in hand with citizenship, projects that are also created among citizens. And for this, to be able to develop this line of work, we are opening many subsidies for cultural projects within the creative fabric, because we might have a good project that can be organized or developed beyond the administration. So not only can we take into account culture from the administration point of view, but we have to take into account the promotion of the creative fabric of a society. I don't really agree with you when you said that there had to be a leader so that collective process of knowledge works. I think we have many examples of citizen labs. In Madrid, we have Media Lab Prado, for example, where other methodologies are being used, how to create citizens' science in these labs. We have many examples around the world. The network of labs is well known, and this movement generates knowledge in the 21st century.
Well, as regards to leader compared to the facilitator, great leaders today are great idea facilitators to make concepts flow. And it is when you are able to be at the same level with the purpose in the center, and rather than a leader, you have a facilitator. You make all the people contribute their best to that purpose. I think that's the point. Yeah, please. Well, I totally agree on the fact that SDGs have to be bottom up, maybe through a project of group formation that end up creating this participation of society. But the main problem is that people have to be identified with that SDG. They have to feel it, and in some way the different cultures, especially Nordic or Latin cultures, we work with different concepts that we are able to assume, and we assume ones or others, and the society ends up demanding the countries these SDGs. So when we've talked about plastics in Wales, of course this happens because there has been an identification of these groups with that goal. What I ask, and it's something that has been a matter of concern to me, is that how we can make this society, not through Wales or plastics, but through culture, how we can make that society to feel identified with these goals. It is something complex and difficult to accomplish, because from the States, as we've said, it's impossible.
¿Quién quería contestarla?
I love that question. Through the emotion of things, I think that culture as an infinite magma that has an impact on our lives is a vehicle of reaching the heart of people. I've seen a documentary on the 150 tons of plastics raised awareness among people who already knew this reality, and they are probably closer to mobilization. So I think emotion is the key, through emotions, and that is also the language of culture. That's my opinion. I think someone else wants to take the floor. Yes, go ahead. Well, nowadays we have many artistic languages, cinema, literature, and we have raised awareness through documentaries, books, films. Artistic languages, cultural languages have given us that awareness of things without noticing it sometimes. I have learned many things regarding environment through documentaries. And I think culture has to be serving these goals. Go ahead. First of all, thank you very much for this debate. It is very rich. I'm a cultural manager. I work in an international institution. I work with SDGs, and I have a few observations and finally a question or a demand. First of all, it has been said that culture makes us homogeneous. I think that it includes us, because the principle in the agenda has to do with cultural diversity, and especially if we're talking about a world in which 60-70% of the world population will be living in cities in that date, and with migration, etc. So I fully agree that diversity with regard to the organization of civil society is key. I always ask myself, we talk about cities, and the SDGs talks about also communities, sustainable communities, and maybe in cities it is easier. We're talking about communities, smaller communities, it is easier to have that participation. If we're talking about larger cities or countries, it is more difficult. So these sustainable communities are essential to be able to articulate things. And then a concern, what Marta was saying, to educate. I don't think that society has integrated SDGs. Some people are experts in SDGs, but I think it is very important to educate regarding SDH. And the demand would be certain guidelines. I think UNESCO has been working on this, guidelines regarding measurements of social impact. I don't know. With regard to indicators, we've had many difficulties in the cultural sphere, because to be able to elaborate the report that measures the SDGs in the cities, culture is present in several SDGs. There's no specific cultural SDG, but we have several goals, objectives that talk about cultural diversity, sustainable tourism, protecting heritage. So cultural is present in many parts of the agenda. So to be able to measure the cultural sustainability, it has been very difficult for us to find indicators. And we've had many difficulties in our work, and we have to continue working on this. Regarding collective learning As in the cultural sphere, we've been feeling quite isolated. We, as cultural managers, didn't really know how to organize an eco-friendly festival. Sometimes you're not sustainable enough. A year ago, in Madrid, 20 cultural managers united from also different spheres, visual arts, theatre. Then we have people from the Federation of the Association of different municipalities, to really try to convey the message to cultural managers that this is also important for them, that this has a strong impact on their work. So we're working on this. We're called the Platform of Sustainable Culture. We've created a space where us as cultural representatives can share this information and knowledge. Adrian is asking for the floor. I know that we're running a little bit late. Very brief comment, maybe? No? Yes? No. Well, I would like to close this event with 2 quotes that might help us draw some conclusions regarding some of the debates that we have. One is a sentence from Amartya Sen, Bengali philosophers. Culture involves all our lives, our ambitions, our desires, and the freedoms that we look for. The possibilities and the conditions to be able to participate in culture are among the fundamental freedoms. Their growth is part of development. And I would like to end by thanking you, all of you who are here until the end, with a reflection done by the General Secretary of United Nations regarding 2015 agenda. He said that we need to use the power of culture regarding transformation. We live in diversity, and comprehension is based on this. We have a lot to learn from cultures in the process of construction of the world that we want. If we want to be successful, this new agenda can be key for the governments and institutions. People have to have an essential role. So culture has to be a strong force to be able to support this new agenda. And thank you very much.